You know what? It never was that serious. It was never that serious. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. This video, this chit chat is going to be all about leaving a toxic relationship and what happens after you leave said relationship. So if you're interested, if you're in this space, if you're about to be in this space, keep watching for sure. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Stephanie, and I originally started this channel because I was leaving a toxic relationship. To be more specific, I was leaving someone who was dealing with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. But of course, they hadn't come to grips with that, but I have. I had enough and I wanted to leave. But leaving a relationship like that, leaving any type of abusive or toxic relationship is extremely, extremely difficult, and only a certain amount of people understand, right? So those who are also going through it or those who have already left. And that just felt really marginalizing, and it really felt like I didn't know who I can connect with. But I knew someone out there understood my sentiments, whether I was able to express them, put words to them or not. So I started my channel and I just documented how I was feeling, what I was not feeling, my stumbles and my triumphs. And I gained over 1,500 of you, and I could not be more grateful for that. But I wanted to just take a moment to kind of just think back and look at where I am now. So a little bit about my story. I have a wonderful 4-year-old daughter who I single parent, and I say I single parent because I am the one who is 100% with her 24/7 since she has been born. Her father has been involved here and there, but not on a consistent basis, and certainly not on the basis that a child needs in order to have a secure attachment style. So it's been kind of co-parenting, but for the most part, parallel parenting or non-involvement at all, which I've decided is really best for my development, her development, and I really prioritize, and I'll explain later, my development as a mom over my child in this type of situation. And I'll explain that, like I said, a little bit later. So this video for me is a bit of a celebration as well, because I don't know if you're like this, but I just recently realized that I have a really hard time acknowledging when I've done something. Like, instead of when I get to like the achievement, my goal, instead of being like, yes, okay, I did it, I got there, it just feels like a relief instead. Like, it just feels like, okay, I'm glad I just got it done. Check. Okay, on to the next thing, right? I don't like take my time to really sit in and realize like how monumental something is, how huge of a thing I just did. And I think leaving a relationship that is abusive is more than monumental. And it's a certain like earth-shattering thing that you just did, that you have to take time to sit down and like recenter yourself in what you just did and like congratulate yourself for what you just did. Even if you have not for sure left or cut off all ties yet, even the thinking about the decision to leave is a monumental thing. So I also, if you're not out of your relationship yet, I want you to also join in feeling like you need to celebrate yourself, because just the thought of this is not for me means that you just realized how much more you deserve. Meaning that old, like, people telling you have no self-esteem, so that's why you stay in this relationship, da, da, da. Like, no, like, you're showing that you, that strong you, is in there. It just needs some help to leave. And so while I was sitting with my thoughts and just kind of really like thinking back to all that I had been through, all the changes that happened while I was with this person, and the things that I just sometimes have and still carry a little bit of shame about, I wrote down some things that I noticed happened to me after leaving my toxic relationship. So a year after leaving, I wrote down 6 major things that happened, and I wanted to share them with you guys and kind of compare notes, see if you guys have felt any of these, experienced any of these, or if you have a different perspective to them. I definitely want to hear that as well. But I'm going to share my 6 things that happened 1 year after I left my toxic relationship. All right, so while I read these off to you guys, I'm going to have my phone with me. You'll see me looking down. It's just my notes. I'm still present with you guys. The first thing that happened to me a year after leaving my toxic relationship is that I found that healing is ongoing. Not only is healing ongoing, but your nervous system is still wide open. I don't know if you've ever had a toothache or an exposed nerve in your tooth, but think of it that way. Everything else in your mouth is fine, but once something touches that exposed nerve, the pain is unbearable. You're immediately unable to focus on anything else. That is literally healing. Your nerve is exposed, and more specifically, it's your vagus nerve. Because you've had to be on high alert in order to literally survive your situation, even when the physical presence of that person is gone, your nervous system is still not calmed down. There are triggers everywhere, triggers you didn't even know were triggers. And I find that is where your healing actually lies. Paying attention to your nervous system and taking steps to calm your nervous system down. So the things I did to calm my nervous system down was to literally make myself feel safe in any and everything that I did. I don't care how small it feels or how dumb it feels. When you were in that toxic relationship, you were dealing with someone who probably was withholding from you, who made you feel unsafe, which made you question everything that you did or everything that you didn't do, and made you question your reality. So it's time to replenish yourself, making yourself feel safe. So whenever I felt something that in my toxic relationship would be categorized as irrational, or I'm being dumb, or I'm being silly, now, till this day, when I feel a certain way, I validate my feelings. I learned this line through therapy, and I think one of my other friends really brought this to me. She says, you have to validate your feelings with this one line. It's super simple. It makes sense that you feel that way. It makes sense that you feel that way. I use that for myself and for others who feel safe to express their own feelings to me, because it's just immediately calming. As soon as I feel a feeling, I just tell myself, it makes sense that you feel that way. Sometimes you do realize after you calm down that, oh, this may have been an overreaction, or I didn't, you know what, it never was that serious. It was never that serious. And it's okay that it wasn't that serious, but you got there not because someone shamed you into getting to that realization. It's because you let the feeling move through your body without judging it. You let your feelings just be your feelings, and then you are able to get to the next step of what needs to be solved, or whatever you need to do next. So pay attention to your nervous system, pay attention to those triggers. You can't avoid triggers. I actually say don't avoid the triggers. When you meet those triggers, see how your body reacts to that trigger, and then just give yourself what you need, whether that's validation, whether that's to cry unabashedly, or literally just to sit in silence. Whatever it is you need to get back to yourself, do it for yourself. The second thing that happens after you leave a toxic relationship is that you start putting two and two together. Meeting and getting in a relationship with someone who is abusive to you is actually not an accident. It's not an accident, and it's also not your informed choice to do so. Nobody sets out to be duped. So get rid of that shame as much as you can. I still live with a little bit of shame for myself and wishing that I made different decisions and different choices, but carrying that shame does nothing for you, except for take on a chunk of responsibility that doesn't fully belong to you. And here's what I mean by that. Getting involved with someone who's abusive didn't just happen overnight. The stepping stones and the pathway for that person to get into your life was likely being laid far before you even knew that person existed. For example, for me, it wasn't until I left that relationship and really got into therapy that I started to realize that a lot of the patterns that I was noticing in this relationship were actually things that I had become used to and desensitized to because of the household I grew up in. So for example, in my household, I was left to figure things out a lot for myself, right? So I was underparented. While my parents did the best they could, especially my mom, I was definitely underparented. And what I mean by that is a lot of the things were put on me to kind of handle. I was treated as an adult a little bit too soon. And it may be because my mom was also just dealing with her own toxic relationship and couldn't be fully available to help me figure things out. But she trusted me a little bit too much, which then made me have a lot of, which then made me read a lot of situations incorrectly. I mean, I'm a child, and you leave it to my interpretation, and it's not always the best interpretation. Taking it a step further, I was also in a household where the silent treatment was used a lot. And very recently, it's been, said that that is actually a very, very abusive thing to do to anybody. but to a child especially, because when you're giving a child the silent treatment as a form of punishment, you leave that child to have to guess. There is no communication happening. It's actually extremely childish as well. You're showing the person that you do not have the ability to communicate, or if you do have the ability to communicate, that they're not worthy of your communication, right? And so that child or that person is left to have to figure out how you're feeling, how they should approach how you're feeling, and tiptoe around you until you calm down or that you speak to them. So what that left me doing in relationships is always having to figure it out on my own. So that person withheld from me, and instead of me saying, okay, well, until you're ready to talk or until you're ready to grow up and communicate, I'm out of here, or this just doesn't work for me. And instead of saying that, I, from what I was brought up in, ran to people like that. Like, oh, okay, I know how to figure this out. It's a puzzle. Like, it's just everything that I had been groomed to do was coming out when people were treating me that way. And so the groundwork was already laid for me to deal with someone who isn't being respectful to me or showing me that they care about my feelings or actually wanting to solve a problem when a conflict comes up. So you really start to put two and two together because you see that, hey, like, what happened to me in this relationship is actually not my fault. I had no idea that this red flag was something that I'd been experiencing before. And because it looked like I could handle it then, I thought I could handle it now. I mentioned that I went to therapy to figure these things out. It's really important that once you realize you put your two and twos together, you do need that extra hand holding. You need that extra help that are not just your friends in order to get ways to move past your realizations, right? So it's not enough to realize, because trauma is not only about the things that happen to us, it's also about things that didn't happen to us. So I was never taught how to leave a relationship, and thus I needed to go to therapy to get the tools and to get the roots of that trauma handled so that I could leave relationships moving forward. So always add therapy, intentional therapy to your two and two realization. The third thing that happens a year after you leave a toxic relationship is that you realize that it was never that you didn't love yourself enough. It's that you had a lack of boundaries. People who are abusive seek out those who do not have a strong sense of boundaries. If you lack boundaries, you're more than likely someone who is easily taken advantage of, whether that be by your parents, whether that be by your friends, people in the workplace, and especially for purpose of this video, a toxic person. They realize that they can literally infiltrate your entire day, your moods, your emotions, by simply taking advantage of the fact that you don't know how to say no. You don't know how to prioritize yourself and your own well-being over their feelings, their emotions, or whatever they're projecting onto you. And because of that lack of boundary, people who are preying on you tend to use this term that I just recently learned as projection identification. So regular projection would just be, you know, you're having a bad day, and so you're kind of mean to other people, or you feel a little bit insecure about yourself, so you have one or two snarky comments about someone else that you're seeing, a stranger or someone else that you know. But projective identification goes a little further in that when someone feels deeply insecure within themselves, which is usually a narcissistic person or a toxic person in general, not only do they have those insecurities and treat others poorly, but they actually project those insecurities onto you as if they're your insecurities and not theirs. So without a boundary, you start to internalize that person's insecurities as your own, when it's actually not your problem. You were never the problem. They are the problem. So after you leave a person like that, you really start to work on your boundaries, saying no, getting comfortable with no, and knowing who you are as well. Hey, this doesn't make me feel good, so I'm not going to test it. I know what happens when I do this, so I'm not going to try to paint a different picture and say, well, I can fit. Stop rearranging the narrative to fit someone else's feelings or their needs or their wants when you know it doesn't agree with the boundary that you need to have for yourself. The fourth thing that happens a year after you leave a toxic relationship is that you realize the importance of a routine. I know right now it's all the rage on Instagram, on Pinterest, on TikTok to have this daily routine. And a lot of it may look like fluff, but it's actually really helpful for someone who's come out of a toxic relationship. When you're in a toxic relationship, you most likely have a codependency issue. And for those of you who are not sure what codependency is, in plain terms, you are literally dependent on that other person for the way that you move. So I don't know if you've ever noticed while you're in your relationship, or maybe after you've come out of your relationship, that your literal mood for the day was set by how your partner was behaving or not behaving that day. How you could wake up and be having a great day, but that your partner says one thing that feels a little bit off, or they kind of don't respond the way that you needed them to respond to something, and now you're in your head all day. Your entire day is derailed. Maybe you want to do an activity and your partner is kind of not as excited to do it, or just says they don't want to do it, period, leaving you to feel alone. And then so you don't go do that activity that you really wanted to do. That is a sign of codependency. So to battle that, you really need to get into a routine. You need a routine that helps you to prioritize not only doing things for yourself, but one that lets you do things by yourself. After coming out of a toxic relationship and that codependency type of attachment that you've had, you need to be able to do things alone so that you don't get frightened by the feeling of loneliness. You need to love your own company. Those who are not comfortable with being alone are doomed to go back to that toxic situation every time they feel lonely. So do the activities that you want to do. Get up and have a set by the clock routine, or just 3 big things that you know that you need to do every single day that prioritize your happiness, that prioritize your emotions, and that prioritizes you for the day. The 5th thing that happens a year out of being in a toxic relationship is that your inner narrative starts to change. Once your nervous system begins to regulate a bit more, you start to speak to yourself differently. The things that you allow in your space also start to change. The first thing that happened for me is that I stopped telling myself and priding myself in saying that, I don't really need much from this person. I don't really need much from the person that I'm dating. There is no honor in not needing anything from your partner. A partner is there solely to make your life easier. While they're not responsible for your happiness, only you're responsible for your happiness, your partner is there to share the load. There is no reward in taking up all the responsibilities of a relationship or a partnership for yourself. So I stopped telling myself that. I do need a partner who understands I have needs and that they need to be able to meet those needs or try their hardest to meet those needs. I don't want someone who's talking about it. I definitely need someone who is about it and who is going to come to my rescue when I need them to. Your inner narrative is also going to change once you realize how much you would never allow someone to come in and undo all the hard work that you've been doing. Once you've been so kind to yourself and you've really been giving yourself all of the things that you've been withheld from, right? So things in your childhood, things in your past toxic relationships, things in your most recent toxic relationship, you've been giving yourself all those things. Flowers. You don't wait for someone to give you flowers. You give yourself flowers. You step out and go to the movies on your own. You go hang out with your friends and remember how great life is again after you've had a couple of days down. You crack open a little wine or champagne middle of the day. Once you start treating yourself the way you want to be treated, you will never again allow someone who comes into your life and wants to give you less than that. No one can convince you that you deserve less after you have been giving yourself everything. And as an extension to that, you also start to protect your inner child like no other. This, I needed a little help in therapy because if I'm being fully transparent, the way I was at the beginning protecting my inner child was being pretty brutal. Like I just was attacking anything that felt like it was an attack to my inner child, the person who I've been working so hard to reconnect with and protect. I didn't want to react that way anymore. I didn't want to be taken out of my element in the name of protection. So I need a little help for that. Maybe you'll need a little help for that, or maybe you don't. But the point is you start to realize that you're not only protecting you, but you're protecting the little you who did not get the things that you are working so hard to give yourself now. And the biggest thing that happens while your inner narrative is changing is that you learn to give yourself grace. This is a muscle you are strengthening. You don't leave someone and gain all these boundaries and self-respect and routines or whatever overnight. It's literal practice. You have to do it over and over. You have to fail at it over and over again until you find your groove and until you stand on everything above all, standing on your piece above all. And so all those times that you will fail, the times that you might slip up and go back or open up communication again, you'll give yourself grace because you realize while you still are headed towards your destination, which is peace, which is self-love, which is self-respect, that sometimes you're human and that you may have doubled back, but that's okay. You're not going to stay there. And the next time you go back, you're not going to stay as long as the last time you went back. And then you're going to stay less and less until you don't ever feel the need to go backwards anymore. And that's what grace does for you. You don't cut yourself cold turkey off of human emotions, but you realize that human emotions happen. And here's how you can move forward with those emotions. The sixth thing that happens after you leave a toxic relationship is you realize the difference between the friends you have and the friends that you need. So this one is a bit personal for me because it was a really, really big realization and kind of a hurtful realization until I took my ego out of it. So if you are someone who is in a toxic relationship or someone who has left a toxic relationship, you probably realize that not everyone understands what it is that you have gone through or what it is that you are going through, especially if you're like me and we're going through an abuse that wasn't necessarily physical, where it may have left visible bruises, but it was a mental and emotional abuse. Trying to convince others that you are being mentally abused is like, what can I compare it to? It's like trying to convince people that the sky is not blue, it's actually red. You are seeing the red, but everyone else is seeing the blue because of what your partner is showing others, but they're not showing that to you when you get behind closed doors or when you're just not around a huge crowd. And because of this, you need the right people around you. Now, I'm not saying to drop the friends that you have just because they don't understand you. There are criteria for who you should drop and who you should keep. But you do need to get around a group of people who can understand you. Took my ego out of being upset with my friends who didn't understand me because, here's another analogy, I was judging a fish on its ability to climb a tree. If a person has not gone through mental or physical abuse, they're limited to the scope of information that they can give you. They quite literally don't know what it feels like or how to navigate that world. So the only things they can offer you are pretty surface level. When you're craving and yearning for more information or more of a support for you to get out of that situation. Don't blame those friends. While the friends you currently have may not fully understand what it is that you're going through, other people can. I came on the full-on internet to get friends or people or a community of people who might have understood what I was going through. And that made me feel less crazy. It made me stop doubting myself, and it eventually helped me in never going back to that toxic situation. So find yourself a community, find yourself people, find yourself strangers who won't judge what you're going through, who won't feel tired with you repeating the same cycles over and over again, so that you can start to feel strong enough to leave your situation. So remove your ego from it. It is not always about how your friends can or can't support you. Sometimes you're just looking to the wrong people for support. So those are the 6 things that you may find will happen after a year of being free of your toxic relationship. I also wanted to end this video speaking directly to those who may still be in a relationship that is hurtful and or categorized as toxic. The first thing I want to say to you is that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you have to deal with someone who is not respecting your needs and who does not see you for who you are. I'm sorry that it feels so hard right now to leave, maybe because you have a child, maybe because you don't know what's on the other side of leaving, maybe because you're just downright scared. I hate that. I hate that you're feeling that way, but it makes sense that you're feeling that way. I hope that you're able to lean on someone who understands you. I hope you're able to reach out, whether it be once, twice, or 40 times without judgment, to someone who can support you in making your moves to leave. If you're not ready yet, that's okay. Maybe you'll be ready tomorrow. Maybe you'll be ready in a month, and maybe you'll be ready in a full-on year, as long as you're safe. Don't be afraid to reach out for the help that you need in order to leave a toxic relationship. It's extremely hard to maneuver one, and it's extremely hard to leave one by yourself. No matter how strong you think you are, you need help. And I also want to remind you to celebrate every time that you have tried to leave. It doesn't matter if you went back. Those are human emotions and human errors. You are human. You will go back until you don't go back anymore. And lastly, I want to say that I am very proud of you. No matter what stage you are in leaving a toxic relationship, whether it's you're realizing that you need to leave it, whether you're trying to leave it actively, or whether you've left, I am equally as proud of you. Now make yourself proud and keep at it until you get what you deserve. And remember that if he or she wanted to, they would. But thank God you will do for yourself. Thanks for watching. Bye.